Hi, welcome to Straight Talk Real Estate with Ken Poletski. I am Ken, and I've been helping buyers, sellers, and investors navigate real estate for over 30 years now. I started this series on how buyer agency agreements are being used today and explaining that entire form to you so that you understand what it is like when you're working with an agent and what your expectations should be as a buyer. And just being educated on what the form is important. Instead of handing you a form and telling you to sign it, understand it yourself, I'm breaking it down so that you understand every paragraph of this form. And we've been doing a series on it for a few weeks now and talking about it. And if you haven't seen those previous episodes, you should probably go back and start at the beginning and then get through them all. So today we're going to be talking about compensation, how agents get paid, and why it matters to you as a buyer. And we're going to be talking just about the form itself, but about a specific section of this form where it talks about compensation and how it affects your bottom line. And that's how agents get paid, is through compensation or commission based on the sales price of the home. And you are, as a buyer, looking to actually, as a buyer now, being required to sign a buyer agency agreement, and this compensation piece is going to be part of that. So I hope you learn a little bit here on this episode, and so how it's going to impact your offer or your negotiating power, and ultimately what you pay for the home is going to be all explained in what we go through here today. So let's start with historically how compensations were structured, right? When a seller hired a listing brokerage firm and a listing agent, they signed a thing called a listing agreement with that brokerage. And inside that agreement, there was a clause in there where the seller agreed to pay a commission when the home sells based off the sales price. And that commission was typically split between the listing agent and the buyer's agent. And so it was split as it had been traditionally for years. I've done this for 30 years now. And just till a couple years ago, there had been no other way of doing it that I had seen or experienced in all of the contracts that I've written over those years. So when that was split, it was usually split on a 50-50 basis. It could be a little bit more on the heavy side of the listing side, but the compensation wasn't directly a piece that was negotiated by you, the buyer. And this is why the new law was written, was because the transparency of what the agent was being paid wasn't completely provided to the buyer, because it was in the listing agreement, not in the buyer's agency agreement, and definitely not on the purchase and sell agreement, which it is today. And so for years, you've been told, don't worry, the seller pays the commission, right? And in most cases, that's still true today. Probably 99% of the sellers are still offering compensation or asking that compensation be negotiated in the purchase and sell. But more importantly, it's to understand in this episode of how that compensation originated from the seller's agreement and how it's went into the buyer's agency agreement and now has moved on into the purchase and sell agreement. So, and that's what's changed mostly, is that it's visible, right? It's actually right there on the purchase and sell, and it is negotiable when it becomes compensation between you choosing a buyer to represent you in the pursuit of buying a home, right? So today there's still sellers offering compensation. Yep. And that is true, right? So they're still offering that. It may be less than what your buyer agency agreement compensation is. And sometimes it's none. Sometimes the seller's saying no, but they would look at it in the purchase and sell agreement or the offer. So it's not just part of the negotiation. It's part of the whole process, as you will, of today. So don't just assume that the seller's paying it, because that is not always the case.